Hello, this is your host, Belle Shavy speaking. Welcome to today's episode of the Morrison Family Center for Student Wellbeing's podcast, WellCat 101. The purpose of this podcast is to give students an opportunity to share their college experiences, their advice, or interesting anecdotes for listeners who are students, staff, parents, etc. Each episode topic will be related to student well-being and or mental health through the lens of positivity and growth. We hope you enjoy this episode of WellCat 101.
Hey guys, welcome to the third episode of WellCat 101. I am so excited about this topic today. We're going to be talking about dating in the digital age. Today's topic is just a little bit more personal than most. So before we begin the episode, I would kind of like to provide a content disclosure.
This episode features talk of subjects directly and indirectly relating to toxic relationships, manipulation, gaslighting, red flags, and unhealthy romantic and platonic relationship dynamics. Please continue listening at your own discretion and know that on-campus resources regarding these topics are linked in the description.
So please make yourself comfortable as we get ready to dive in. I'm here with my coworker at the Morrison Family Center for Student Wellbeing, Trina Knight. Trina, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you?
Yes, hello, my name's Trina Knight. I am with the Morrison Family Center for Student Wellbeing. I serve as K-State's Sexual and Relationship Violence Coordinator, so I do all the education and the outreach regarding that topic. So if you've seen programs like, for example, back in fall here at K-State in Manhattan, we did Cats and Bats, where everybody was able to make a little plush, learn a little bit about our sexual and relationship violence, resources that we've got here on campus. We do all sorts of those kinds of activities. So just anything involving sexual and relationship violence presentations, as well as events and awareness months, that's what I do.
Awesome. And we get into a lot of yap sessions here at Morrison Family Center. We do work, but we like to yap. And that's exactly what we're going to do today. So before we get into dating in the digital age and relationships and dynamics of relationships and all of that good stuff, we start every episode with an intro question. And this intro question is not as goofy as the other few questions that I have asked on this podcast before, because this one is just, what's your favorite piece of media that you've consumed recently, Trina?
I consume a lot of media. I watch TV probably like 7 hours a day. I can't even be lying. So my favorite TV show right now is The Righteous Gemstones. They just kicked off their final season, so I enjoyed that this week. I watched Apple Cider Vinegar. I hear that you're a fan of that one as well. For books, I just finished Parable of the Talents. It's book 2 out of Parable of the Sower by Octavia Butler. Kind of scary, super interesting, but if you're into it, I highly encourage you to read it.
Nice. Those, I also consume a lot of media. I don't watch a whole lot of TV shows, but I've really been getting into like I don't know, kind of like chick flicks TV shows. I've been watching, even though it's really raunchy, I watch a lot of Sex and the City. Yep. Just because it's funny and I turn it on when I'm doing my homework. And I also like a lot of true crime / like documentaries about just phenomena, specifically social media phenomena, which I've been consuming a lot of because I just watched the Ruby Frankie documentary that came out on Hulu, and I'm in the middle of Apple Cider Vinegar right now, and I want to watch an actual documentary about Belle Gibson because I have never heard about her before, and it's just so interesting to me how appearances on social media contrast to real life, which is what we're kind of going to get into today. So that's a really interesting thing that I've just been observing and watching a lot of media with that. Unfortunately, I haven't read a lot of books lately just because I do so much reading for classes. Since I'm a theater major, I take a lot of classes where we read lots of scripts and things. So I've been reading a lot of plays. And one of the plays that I just read is called Stop Kiss, and I'm forgetting who it is by, but I think it takes place in the 90s, and I don't remember if it was actually written in the early 90s, but it's about these two closeted lesbians who live in New York. One has just moved to New York, and unfortunately, there's like time jumps in the play, but unfortunately, they're victims of a hate crime. And so it kind of documents and shows the audience the progression of their relationship, and then it time jumps to after the incident happens. So we get to see the before and after, but we're told that throughout the play. And so It's really interesting. It's not all sad. The play is really fun. So I definitely recommend everyone to read Stop Kiss.
Yeah, check it out.
Yeah. But anyway, let's transition into today's topic, relationships and dating in the digital age. So this one is a topic I'm really excited about because in contrast to our previous episode, this one is way less structured. I have questions and prompt questions. Of course, Trina, you and I spoke before this about what kind of things we're going to be talking about, just so that we're prepared. But I want to just see where the conversation goes and to kind of examine the way that social media and phones and the internet has impacted personal relationships, specifically dating and romantic relationships, because I talk to several people even every day about the dynamics of social media relationships. We're going to get into like what a situationship is and how complete access to other people has caused maybe more distance than connection in some cases. Ghosting is a lot more common, I feel like, and we're going to get into all of that. So that's really exciting. But first, I kind of want to define, when we're talking about, in this episode, relationships versus dating. So the way that we're going to be kind of talking about it is a relationship can be anything. It can be a platonic relationship with a friend. It can be a coworker, someone you work with, you have a relationship with them. Or it could be a romantic partner. You have a relationship with a romantic partner. So when we say the word relationship, we're not always referring to romantic. However, when we talk about dating, that is in the romantic sense. So that's kind of how we're going to operationalize the definitions of those terms in this episode.
Yes, I agree.
Okay, so let's talk about relationships in the digital age.
Okay, so relationships in the digital age, all relationships are hard. The digital age has made them both more accessible, but also more difficult. I would say the main area where it starts to get really kind of mucky would be in communication. Because when we're talking to one another, we can talk in person. What are we hearing? What are we seeing? We're hearing vocal tone. We're seeing people make facial gestures. We can see the posture of their body. So when we're talking about like all of those bodily functions that we see, everything that we're seeing on their face, when you go online, you can't see that anymore. And yes, we do have emojis, right? We rely a lot on emojis, but you also have to consider that some people are going to view an emoji differently than you intended. When I give my presentations, I always ask for a show of hands of how many people have ever gotten into an argument with a friend or a family member online because of a miscommunication. And it's almost every single hand goes up. And a lot of that has revolved around emojis. We talk also about punctuation in text, right? I don't know about for you all, but for me, when I say yep with a period, not good. I'm not happy. But when I say yep with an exclamation mark, all good. Same with the dreaded K. As in
I
K
was
as
just
in the
about
letter.
to say, okay, good. K, don't mess with it.
Exactly. Yep. So the little things like that are really making a big difference, and it has made that online space a little bit more complicated to navigate. But I do want to emphasize that online relationships are still relationships. There still is a way to make those purposeful and meaningful, to be intimate and deep. I just think that it takes a little bit of hard work to kind of get over that hump and some of the barriers that online communication presents.
Absolutely. And I think that communication, like you said, has been affected positively and negatively. I think about long distance relationships have such a different dynamic than they used to, because long distance relationships can really work. And I think that digital communication has positively affected long distance relationships because of things like FaceTime and Snapchat, where you can send pictures, and, obviously calling and texting at any hour of the day is really helpful and really important for when you're in a long distance relationship, because it can keep that constant communication going, even when you're not around the other person. When I think back to, for example, my parents dated when they were in college, but for a time they went to two different colleges. When talking to my mom, she would say that, she would maybe get to call my dad one night a week, and she had to pay for it on a payphone. And sorry to my parents, I'm dating you a little bit right now. But I think about now, having to do long distance over a summer with my current partner, and thinking about we FaceTimed quite a bit and we talked quite a bit. And I don't know if him and I would have made it through. I hope we would have, but I don't know if we would have made it through without having, even if we weren't calling or texting, maybe sending a good night every once in a while is really important. So yes, online relationships are valid and very, very real, and the connection there is real. However, the constant accessibility and the ability to look at a text and not answer it has completely changed the game, because now someone can say something to you and you can choose to ignore it. If someone's, you can do that in real life. If someone says something to you, you can ignore it, but they see that you're ignoring it. They see that you eye roll. They see that you walk away. And it's much harder to ignore a real life person talking to you than it is to look at a text and put your phone down.
Yeah, nobody wants to be on that dreaded left on red. That doesn't feel good.
Yes.
I would agree with you. I think that's accessibility has been really positive, but also a bit negative. The sense of personal time, personal space, and boundaries has completely started to blur because of that. And we all feel like we need to be accessible 24/7, and everybody else expects that of us. So I do encourage everyone listening, when you're in your relationships, to check in, hey, I haven't heard from you. Is everything okay? And if that person said, yeah, I just need a little bit of time. I'm really busy with a project right now. Is it okay if we talk next week? That's them stating that they need a boundary, and I think that we need to respect that. And I wish more people would set those. Most people aren't going to get upset at that, right? It's just what we've kind of gotten used to. But like we'll talk about later, it's better than the alternative, which is just complete ghosting, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And so this is a good transition to talk about this term that I think is relatively new. I don't know. I started hearing people talk about situationships when I was in high school and now into college. I hate the word situationship. I don't like the connotation around it. I don't like what it is, because I've seen so many people in my life and other people's lives. It just never turns out for the better, because it's a situation, meaning it's a communication between two people that's maybe really not very clear, because it's not as defined as a relationship, but it's still a situation, hence situationship. And as someone who is very fond of communication and likes to have good communication and strives to have good communication when it isn't, the whole thing just doesn't make any sense. However, it is now kind of considered, a talking stage is now kind of considered a normal part of dating, which I think came along with the internet and Snapchat culture and things like that. So do you want to talk a little bit about situationships?
Yes, I would agree that has come about as a result of this internet culture, right? Because that is one of the key benefits of online relationships. There is not necessarily a pressure that you've got to commit right away, that it's got to be super clear. Again, the talking phase. So a situationship is, like Belle said, more than friends, but also not quite exclusive either. So those lines are really fuzzy. It's casual. It's spontaneous. There's a lot of ambiguity. There's a lot of freedom from commitment and rules and labels. That sounds exciting at first, but as most of you know, it wears off pretty quickly. So those things that made it so exciting can also be the downfall, right? So I want to talk about why situationships are so common, especially among college students. So here's some interesting facts. The average age for marriage in the U.S. today is between 28 and 30.
Wow. That kind of comes as a surprise to me, because I am from a smaller town, and a lot of people kind of in that area got married before that point. Interesting.
Exactly. So a lot of Gen Z's parents who were getting together in the 80s, that was around 22 to 24. So the age of settling down, so to speak, has gotten much further along the line. And this is for a lot of reasons, right? There's more career and educational opportunities and expectations, right? So we know now that a lot of careers now require some sort of grad school. You don't just stop, right? There's longer career growths, a little bit more transition. I applaud Gen Z. They don't just stay in one career for the rest of their lives, right? That's kind of gone out the door, actually. So lots of transitions. Marriage and children, they're no longer the expected life path. And that's okay. Some people may choose a single life forever. Some folks may choose to stay child-free. So that's totally normal and completely acceptable. And also, relationships are expensive. They're expensive on your time, they're time-consuming, and they're financially expensive, right? When you barely pay for yourself, right, to go out for a nice meal, and then you've got to pay for somebody else. So that's just not feasible for a lot of young people in this situation.
Absolutely. And I think that in college, a lot of people who they're feeling, this is where you're meeting the most people in your life. And so I think a lot of people feel that pressure to get into a long-term relationship like really fast because they hear stories about, when they graduate college, they're maybe the same age as when their parent got married. And so then they're like, well, I don't even have a prospect of somebody. I don't even have an idea of who I would marry.
No
and then
suitors.
Yeah, no eligible suitors around to court me. And so there's just there's this weird pressure that you feel that maybe you're behind, but there's nobody telling you that you're behind. Everybody's life path is different. Now, if you find the person and they're the one and you get married, again, good for you. I think that this pressure to do that is a little weird because everyone finds people at different points in time. And so I think what happens with the talking stage and situationship is when you're looking for something fun and casual and talking stage, that's when it's really fun. However, if the other person doesn't see it as this casual fun thing, then they're expecting more, and that's when things get a little bit weird and tricky because then you're like, well, I'm not committed to this person. I don't want to commit to this person. I thought we were just having fun. And this other person is trying to hold you accountable but you said this to me, and you said this to me, and that meant something, and I thought that meant that you wanted more. And then those lines get so crossed and blurred. And I think because of the social media communication, you don't hear a person's tone, you don't see a person's body language, you don't see a person's facial expressions. You have no idea that the other person might be interpreting something differently than the way you meant it.
Yeah, exactly. So the commitment, the lack of commitment there, so to speak, the spontaneity, super fun, chill at first, but then it starts to wear off. And it's normal and natural for people to start wanting answers, to start to wonder where this relationship is headed. Are we headed to a relationship? Are we going to go back to being friends? Can we go back to being friends? Eventually, we move past that just having fun stage. The problem is one person typically moves into that stage much quicker than the other person, and that's kind of where the confusion starts to hit, and we start to ask for expectations and boundaries to be set. And we want something that's a little bit more serious, perhaps. Either make it serious or call it off. But nobody wants to be viewed as clingy, right?
Nobody. Everybody wants to be chill.
Yes, nobody wants to be viewed as clingy or as, quote unquote, catching feelings. But we talk about catching feelings, so to speak, like catching a disease, as something that's negative or unwanted, especially in the context of these situationships.
Absolutely. And I think that there is definitely, I think that not everybody when they enter a talking stage always knows whether they want it to be fun and short or knows whether they want commitment. And so you don't have to know that going in. That's how we create relationships with people. You go into being friends with someone and you don't really know where it's going to go at first when you're just getting to know them. However, when one person doesn't inform them, when they make that realization between whether they want it to be more or they want it to be less, that's when things, I think, go south. at least in my own experience and seeing my friends' experiences, that's, I think, the point of no return, where it's all fun and games, talking, having fun, until one person says something that's like, that maybe means more to another person, and that other person then takes that as confirmation of, oh, you do want more. Sometimes it can be, maybe you meet up with somebody physically. I know we're talking about the internet and digital communication, but sometimes you meet up with someone physically, they hold your hand. Maybe holding hands is casual for one person, but it could mean something really big for the other person. But that's never discussed. And so that's why I think the situationship phenomenon is so strange and interesting to talk about, because those boundaries and lines almost are non-existent.
Yeah, I agree. And that kind of goes back to the crux of why we get in relationships to start. So relationships of any kind make us feel wanted, and they make us feel special. Most people want that at some point. It's normal to feel those things. We want to feel socially connected. We're open to relationships of varying levels of intimacy. Now, intimacy is maybe physical, but it can also be an emotional depth to it, right? We're kind of striving to achieve those things. And again, going back to why they're so common among college students, a lot of college students have never seen a long-term relationship outside of their parents. So they're not even totally sure what it's supposed to look like, what it's supposed to feel like. They've never explored what they're attracted to, what they value. They don't know who they would be in a relationship. Any relationship that you get in with somebody changes you, right? So you're not totally sure who you're going to be, what kind of a partner you think you'd like to be, what kind of a partner you think that you need. So I think the discovery phase makes it even more challenging than before. And nobody wants to feel like a placeholder, right? That makes you feel very unvalued, like your time isn't worth something. And I think that tends to kind of be what it turns into. You're just having fun with this person, essentially using them to figure it out until you find, quote unquote, the one.
Absolutely. And so then what this situationship then develops into is sometimes situationships, the two people involved they talk it out and they establish what they're going to be. Maybe they are going to be more. And maybe they both realize that they want to try to be more, and they want to try a relationship. They want to try going on dates. Real established dates, not just like, oh, we're going to hang out and watch a movie or something. And a real established, like, this is us trying to pursue each other romantically. However, sometimes another thing happens where one person does not want to make a decision, or maybe is indifferent and doesn't really care enough to make a decision and completely ghosts them. So then one person is left with unresolved feelings and unresolved grudge against this other person, and the other person is non-existent. And it's really easy to ghost because, like we said, you can ignore a text, you can leave someone undelivered for 72 hours, and then access them again whenever you want to. So that's interesting. So let's talk about ghosting and that phenomenon.
Yeah, let's. So whenever I talk about healthy relationships in a presentation context, I'll ask them, what do you think are the cornerstones of a healthy relationship? Guess what's always number one? Communication. And when you're in a situationship, communication isn't viewed as valuable and it isn't viewed as necessary. So people feel like I'm an afterthought. They don't value myself. They don't value my time. Nobody likes to feel used and discarded. And when we talk about ghosting, that makes everything about 10 times worse.
Absolutely. And I think then what ghosting creates is this, I'm not sure how to describe it, but just this grudge against the other person. I've seen a lot more of the side of people who have been ghosted rather than, what, the ghosters have done. But I've seen in my experience being ghosted and in my friends' experiences is it creates this mental idea of this other person doing this deliberately and just being evil and trying to, ruin your life and ruin your emotional, they ghosted me and they are just trying to be awful to me and they are just trying to make me upset and they're doing this deliberately. I'm not sure that that's always the case.
Yeah, I would agree. There's lots of reasons that people ghost. The outcome is rarely good, but there are several reasons why. The biggest one that I think is number one, they want to avoid that confrontation with you and having to deal with another person's hurt feelings. And that's tough. That's rough. This is the most common reason. Many people just don't have any idea how to communicate that the relationship has ended for them. They don't know how to express their needs. They don't know how to express what they want. And they feel bad or embarrassed for dragging that relationship out. So I'd say that that's probably the number one reason why people do ghost. Another reason could be fatigue. So when we talk about dating apps, there's a million of them, right? We got Bumble, Tinder, Hinge, Grindr. It gets exhausting, and especially if you have decided not to be exclusive with somebody, it's entirely possible that you are talking to more than one person. And like we just talked about in the context of situationships, eventually those people are going to want to know what you're doing with them, right? So if you have not one, but 5 people asking you, are we exclusive? Is this a relationship? They may decide, maybe ghosting is just the best option because I am completely overwhelmed. So there's demands for exclusivity, answers, boundaries, and when you're getting that from multiple people, it can be a bit overwhelming. Another reason could be some people just don't really want a relationship outside of that online format or context. They may not want to move past that. They may not want to talk on the phone. They may not want to have a face-to-face conversation, a video chat. It could be something sinister like catfishing, or it could be something like social anxiety or general discomfort. Or perhaps they've found out through this course of interacting in a romantic way with you that actually I don't think I want a romantic relationship. I just want to be your friend. And they don't know how to communicate that without hurting somebody's feelings. And there is some more sinister reasons for it, right? It could be used as a form of control or manipulation or as a form of emotional abuse. So when you ghost somebody, you could make that person question this relationship, make them question themselves and their own value or worth, and you can try to goad them into begging for that connection with you. And unfortunately, some people do use that as an abusive tactic. So there are lots of reasons why it happens, but I would say 9 out of 10 times it absolutely causes harm.
Absolutely. And we're not trying to defend ghosting. Ghosting is bad. It is not a good communication strategy.
Right. This is an explanation, not an excuse.
Absolutely. But we're all human. And I think that all of those reasons are very human things. And so even though you might be a person that is like, I would never ghost somebody, maybe you haven't been in a situation yet where a ghosting would be an option for you that you felt more comfortable with rather than confronting the situation. However, confrontation is just a part of life, and it's not a fun part of life, and oftentimes it's really uncomfortable, but it also is never really as scary as you think it's going to be. And the important thing to remember is that it's always going to be better than ghosting. No matter what type of communication you choose, unless it is gaslighting or manipulation, it will be better than just leaving another person hanging. The other person might still not want to talk to you anymore, but at least you've established that the communication between the two of you is going to end, and it is not left unresolved for the two of you to decide what to do with this experience that you had. And it's particularly helpful if you are feeling like ghosting another person. Do that other person the due diligence of telling them, hey, I just don't think that this is going to work out. And again, they will probably still harbor negative feelings toward you. And maybe that's uncomfortable. However, that's just a part of life. So we're talking about ghosting more so in a situationship setting. Ghosting in a relationship setting, when you have an established relationship, is a different thing. And I think that is a little bit more of the manipulation tactic that you were talking about of if you're in an established relationship with someone and you normally talk to them every day and then all of a sudden you haven't heard from them or seen them in 4 or 5 days, that could be for a lot of reasons, but that could mean something a little bit different.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. There are different things you can do instead, right? And that may be the hard thing to do. Be brief, be straight to the point, be honest. You can be brief, blunt, and honest without being unkind or rude. And some people worry that if I am that way, then I'm going to be unkind to them. I'm going to hurt their feelings. Will you hurt their feelings? Maybe. But I do think most people would prefer that you have that open and honest conversation with them up front, tell them what you need instead of dragging them along or ghosting them. So you need to be open and willing to do whatever you can as long as it's safe to kind of help that person get that closure. You can be open and honest about answering questions directly that they might have for you. If you don't think that a relationship could ever move forward, right, whether that's in an online context, in a physical context, or if you just don't have any interest in maintaining any kind of relationship with them, whether that's romantic or a friend, you have to say so.
Absolutely. And so I kind of want to talk about, we talked about that ghosting is definitely something unhealthy if it's happening in a relationship or situationship. I want to kind of talk about what are some signs of a healthy connection with someone, and then we can talk about vice versa. What are some signs of an unhealthy connection with someone? How do you identify that someone is maybe not good for you, or how do you identify that maybe someone is good for you? How do you identify a situationship? Because I would love to say, how do you identify if a situationship is going somewhere? But that's really hard and varies for differently for each person. And also, it's really impossible to identify unless another person says so. So we can look for signs of a healthy connection or an unhealthy connection.
Yeah. So I'd say some signs of healthy connection: open, honest communication, right? That's, again, the cornerstone of any kind of relationship of any sort, online or offline. So good communication. They respect your time. They respect your body. They respect your space. So I talk a lot in my presentations about consent, right? So that's essentially giving that person permission to touch you, to be with you, to give up your time with them. So being able to identify that and respect those boundaries that you have in place are good. When you're in a relationship with somebody, you should always feel free to be in friendly relationships with other people, right? I'm not talking about cheating. That's a whole other topic. Mm-hmm. But if you want to hang out with your friends, if that person's saying, no, you shouldn't, that would be a little bit of a red flag to me. So any kind of isolation methods that they're trying to do to keep you from talking to your friends, especially talking to your friends about them, or trying to stay away from your family, I think that that's definitely something to look forward to.
Absolutely. Yeah. And those are all really great. And you did mention cheating a little bit. It is definitely a thing that happens. And I think that digital communication has unfortunately made it way easier to cheat and keep it secret. And I think that also digital communication has kind of made what constitutes cheating really, I don't know, it's really hard to identify because to different people it means different things. Some people are really bothered by if their partner is following people of the gender that they're attracted to on social media. I know a lot of girls and guys will get upset if their partner is following models or celebrities that are of the beauty standards on Instagram, and things like having friendships with I think obviously having friendships with the gender that you're attracted to is, you can maintain a relationship. Obviously, it's, again, a little bit weird and isolating if they tell you, oh, you can't be friends with this person. But I think that sometimes, if they Snapchat someone all the time or text somebody all the time, or maybe your partner is texting one of their friends more than you, that really bothers a partner. It would maybe bother me just a little bit if there was somebody that my partner was in constant communication with, a little bit more than me. But then also there's to examine, like, well, how often do these people then see each other in person? Maybe I have more connection with my partner in person than my partner has in person with this other person. So it creates this big complicated web. So what constitutes cheating?
I agree that it really varies. It's kind of subjective, and I know that's not the answer everybody wants. But one of the ways that I think that you can identify it is to start to look at those things that make you feel special as a person, and then start to learn what makes your partner feel special. Because if you are giving those things to somebody else, the chances that that person views that as cheating are much stronger. So say A person is someone who really values deep emotional conversations, and they like having that with their partner. That's what makes them feel valued, makes them feel special. But their partner starts doing that with somebody else. That doesn't feel good, and that feels like you're kind of doing what we call emotional cheating or emotional infidelity with that person. So cheating's by no means just physical. And people's definitions of what that's going to be is really all going to depend on what they value and what they deem as meaningful inside that relationship with that other person.
Absolutely. That's so interesting. I love that we're getting into all of these different things. I like what you said about emotional cheating is very, very real cheating. And again, with the communication thing, absolutely bring that up to your partner. If you feel that they're maybe, giving something that makes you feel really special to somebody else. A lot of the time it could be a misunderstanding, but it also is something to talk about and identify.
Right.
So
if your partner, you know them to have issues with body image, perhaps you going and liking a bunch of Instagram models on social media, not the best move, right? Not the move. So trying to figure that out and respect that of your partner. Now, I don't think that you can read somebody's mind, right? That's where communication becomes really important. So I don't necessarily think that you can assume that your partner knows what kind of makes you tick, what might upset you, how you might define cheating. So it's an uncomfortable conversation to have because nobody goes into a relationship necessarily thinking they're going to be a cheater, right? Most people want to go into a relationship assuming they're going to do well, that it's going to be successful. But having that conversation, hey, these are my boundaries. This is what I'm comfortable with. This is what I'm not. If these boundaries are violated, then I'm going to interpret it as cheating or this relationship will end. So having those difficult conversations up front is really important.
Absolutely. And I think it's important to note and want to emphasize throughout the episode is that your boundaries are fine just the way that they are. Compromising boundaries is a very interesting process because you shouldn't have to move your boundaries for somebody else. Mm-hmm. So if your boundaries are violated and you feel violated, communicate that and try your best to communicate it firmly enough that you're like, my boundaries are fine the way that they are. Don't let somebody make you feel like your boundaries are silly or don't make sense, because if those are your boundaries and they make sense to you, that's the only person that they matter to. So boundaries are very important. Boundaries are fine just the way that they are.
Agree. I'm going to invoke Taylor Swift here, okay? So illicit affairs. Go listen to the song. It's super interesting. I pulled out some of her lyrics that I think are really, really pertinent for this topic. So one of them is, don't call me kid, don't call me baby. So communication, again, is that cornerstone of a healthy and mature relationship. One of the red flags that I always tell folks to look out for, especially in a situationship, is if a person makes you try to feel immature or ashamed of your relationship and experience, if you start to express confusion or concern. Confusion or concern in these cases, it's completely normal. And that kind of goes back to the issue of cheating. Like, if you feel like that's cheating, they shouldn't just call you, oh, you're just being immature, you just don't know, right? So it's not immature to catch feelings. Feelings are normal. Feelings are a mature thing to have. We're human. We're emotional. So being honest about your expectations and your needs is going to be necessary, kind of regardless of that level of intimacy that you're trying to get to. And vulnerability can be extremely uncomfortable. However, if you confront a person, if you have a conversation with them, say, hey, what are we talking about? You are liking all these Instagram models like on Instagram, and it's really bothering me. You know that I have some pretty significant issues with self-image. That person should not make you feel embarrassed, ashamed, and more upset and more confused. You should leave that conversation feeling with a little bit more clarity, like you've got a better sense of what's going on in their head. And you should feel relieved that conversation happened. If you're leaving feeling more confused versus relieved, you might have a problem.
Absolutely. And I think it's important to note that if someone is trying to push your boundaries, especially in a situationship, it can be really hard to stand firm in your boundaries, especially in a situationship, because I find in a situationship, you want to do anything you can not to lose it, especially if you like the other person and it's fragile. In a relationship, if boundaries are being violated, you might feel more comfortable bringing it up because you have a solid relationship established and you know that you can have a conversation with them. You might break up, but you might not. The relationship may continue. And hopefully you'll feel confident enough that the relationship will continue after you communicate that, because that's a sign of a healthy relationship. However, with situationships, there is nothing keeping the other person committed. So if another person in a situationship is trying to pressure you into doing something with them, trying to pressure you into telling somebody else something, maybe trying to pressure you to send pictures of yourself that you don't want to send, and you feel like if you don't do these things that this person is going to stop talking to you, that they're going to go get it from somewhere else, stand firm in your boundaries. And it's hard and it's really scary because you're like, I really like this person and I trust them when they say that they're not in the pictures scenario, they're not going to send them to anybody else, or I really like this person and if I don't do this with them, they're going to go do it with somebody else and I don't want them to do that. That's a really big red flag. If you have communicated that you're uncomfortable with something and they're still trying to coerce you into doing it, shut that situationship down, shut it down, and communicate to them that you won't do that.
Yes, I agree. So some of the key tenets of consent, right? Like we kind of talked about, consent should always be freely given. You shouldn't feel like, I guess I should do this because they want to. There should be no strings attached. You should feel enthusiastic about what the consent that you're giving in that scenario. If you feel at all like you're being pressured or coerced, that's non-consensual. So it is important to kind of check in with yourself to see how you're feeling about the situation. Another point I want to emphasize, another red flag we could say, is that sometimes in situationships, especially if they're a little bit older than you, they may claim to know better or what's best for you because they have more experience than you. Don't let them tell you this. A lot of relationship experience doesn't equal good or healthy relationship experience. They don't know what's best for you. And if they're trying to tell you, I know it's best, you just don't know what you're talking about. No, you shouldn't go talk to your family or friends about this. Like, I know. That is a huge red flag. So this can also happen in the form of, have you heard the term negging?
I haven't.
Okay, so negging is a new kind of really big piece of conversation. So it happens when a person insults you under the guise of a compliment. So kind of a backhanded compliment.
Yeah, backhanded compliment. Okay.
Yep, so it can be kind of used as a way to maintain emotional distance in a relationship. I could say like, oh, you're pretty mature for your age, but you're still too young for me. Or you're way cooler about this situation than so-and-so was. Or you're a lot of fun. Maybe someday you'll be ready for a real relationship. So it's kind of that manipulative tactic of both insulting and critiquing you, but also trying to put it in the guise of some sort of compliment. So that's something to watch out for as well.
Yeah. Ooh, I feel like that would be really hard for me to identify goodness, especially like if I was maybe new to college or new to serious relationships. I don't know if I would maybe be able to identify that this person was trying to be negative to me.
It's pretty insidious. It's pretty sinister because you just don't hear it very well, and it can be hard to pull that out, especially when all you want from them is for them to say something nice to you. So all you're hearing is a compliment. Meanwhile, that critique is kind of falling to the back. It's kind of their way of keeping you on the hook and making you feel good.
Giving you just enough attention to keep you around, but not enough attention that you feel fulfilled.
Yes, but also putting you in your place.
Yes.
And saying, I know best, I'm going to keep you here. So that is a big topic of conversation that's coming up in the field of sexual and relationship violence that a lot of us are talking about and trying to kind of work on bringing awareness to.
Absolutely. So for our very last kind of topic, we would not be able to talk about digital relationships without talking about the apps. The dating apps. I'm so glad that you're here, Trina. I don't have very much experience on dating apps. All that I know is stories through friends and kind of reading about them. So of course there's the big one, Tinder. There's Grindr, there's Bumble, there's farmersonly.com. there's several. And now there's even, I've never used them either, but there's like friend apps that are almost like friend dating apps that are kind of set up like Tinder, that is like swipe left, swipe right. So I want to talk about Tinder though, mainly, and just kind of the way that you can safely interact with people on dating apps, and not just safely, but also critically and carefully understand things like when you're being catfished, like we talked about with situationships, when someone is trying to coerce you into something or trying to manipulate you into something because you are interacting with strangers. And I don't think dating apps are bad. I think that people can create meaningful relationships off of dating apps. I also think that if you're looking for something not serious, there's lots of people on dating apps that are also not looking for anything that serious. And I think that that's a good way to then establish that I was never looking for anything serious. You're never looking for anything serious. Perfect. We won't create a situationship out of this moment. You won't have to ghost anyone. They won't have to ghost anyone. It's mutual communication. That's all it's going to be. But because it is online and so easy to lie and so easy to, create a facade, how do you stay safe?
Yeah. So lots of upsides, right? We talked about some of those. There's a lot of people you could choose from. Plenty of fish in the sea. I believe that's another dating app. It's low stakes. There's a lot of expectations to make that commitment right away. You can kind of explore. The platforms can kind of help you match based on some of those things are just non-negotiable for you. Like, say you're a person of faith, there are dating apps that can guide you to other people who
Christian
value
Mingle,
that as well.
Shout out.
Yeah. You can use them for any level of relationship, kind of like Belle was talking about. If you just want a friend, there's an app for you as well. So one of the top things I recommend that people do to stay safe is research your options first. Like, don't just go jumping on every dating site just hoping something sticks, right? Figure out what you want. Are you interested in a hookup, casual? Are you looking for a more long-term relationship? And then kind of basing those interests and deciding which of those apps is going to be best for you. That's going to save you a lot of time and heartbreak in the end, because if you get on the wrong app, if you get on Tinder looking for a serious long-term relationship, you may or may not find it, right? Because a lot of folks on that app are not looking for that same thing. So you might need to look somewhere else. So there's lots of different ways that you can stay safe online. Never share any personal information before you feel ready, especially the identity of your home or your workplace. So check your photos, make sure that your workplace isn't in the background, make sure your house isn't in the background, avoid sharing your address. Don't share your class schedule with somebody that you don't totally trust yet. And avoid sharing intimate images until you're certain that that person is going to be safe and trustworthy. I know that can be kind of tough because even in long-term relationship, those images get shared. So just something to kind of consider. Check your privacy settings. Make sure that you've got it locked down to the degree that you feel comfortable with. Watch out for catfishing and other scammers. There's some ways that you can do this. Avoid talking to people who are asking you for weird things like, can I have your social security number?
Huh?
Yeah, that's weird. Avoid that. Never respond to demands for money or intimate photos. So scammers will often make their demands seem really urgent, like do this immediately. You've probably all seen the phishing scams that kind of come through K-States. Email every now and then.
Don't click on the links.
Don't do it. Yep. If you don't know the email address, don't click on those links. Don't click on those attachments. If they say, I'm stranded in Venezuela, I don't have any money to get home. If I don't get home by tomorrow, I will lose my U.S. citizenship. Don't send them that money. Don't send them money. Some scammers will also try to get those intimate photos from you, kind of try flirting with you, making you feel good about yourself, get those photos from you and use them as a form of blackmail. We call this sextortion. So they might take those photos and say, hey, I've got these photos of you. I'm going to share it with everybody that you love. I'm going to share it with your mom. I'm going to share it with your professor, your boyfriend, whatever is going on for you. So never share those photos with somebody you don't entirely trust, especially if they're not open to voice or video chatting with you. That's a little sketchy. So make that request and kind of see what they say. So what happens in the event that everything seems to be going well? You had a good time talking online. They seem friendly. You feel like you can trust them. Now you think you can go ahead and take that next step and maybe meet in person. These are some things that I encourage you to do. First, ask them to do a voice or a video call. Make sure that person is who they say they are. If they say, no, I won't do that, red flag, full stop. That's not going any farther. This one's a big one that a lot of people don't think of. Always drive yourself to the first date or meeting.
Yeah. Don't ask them to pick you up.
I would steer away from it. And plus, taking your own transportation, you can leave anytime you want. If you start to feel uncomfortable, I don't care if you've known them for 3 years and you thought you'd go on a date and it would go well, not going well at all, you can leave. And it also keeps the location of your residence private until you're ready to share that with them. Because say a date goes completely sour, guess what? They picked you up from your residence. They know where you live. And you just really don't want to put yourself in that situation. This one's kind of obvious. I know a lot of folks do it, which is great. Share your location. You can do that through the apps, or you can just send somebody a text, a family member or friend that you trust. Here's where I'm going to be. Here's the time that I'm meeting this person. At least one person should always know where you're going to be. And you should collaborate with them for a check-in time. If you don't hear from me by an hour and a half from now, send me a text, give me a call if I'm not answering. Come find me, right? Mm-hmm. So making sure that there's always a check-in person for you. Meet in a highly public place. Don't go meeting behind Walmart, right? Meet somewhere that you're around people. Perhaps that's a place that's familiar to you. Maybe you know some of the staff there. You know that you're going to have friends and acquaintances who kind of come in and out, like Radina's or something like that. Exercise some caution if you decide that you do want to drink or consume other substances. I'm never going to tell you not to do that because that is your right, but just kind of be aware about how those substances affect you, what you're comfortable with. If somebody starts to pressure you into drinking or consuming a substance that you're not okay with, date ends, full stop. That's not okay, and that's a little bit sketchy. So make sure that you pick a place that you feel comfortable in. Again, like perhaps that's Manhattan Brewing Company, right? You can trust the bartenders there. You feel safe with them. You know where all the exits are. You know that you're going to have friends and acquaintances kind of coming in and out. So definitely use added caution in that case. Overall, if your date is critical or unreceptive to any of these safety procedures, I would end it. That seems like a big red flag to me. And it's always okay to leave whenever you feel uncomfortable or unsafe, especially living in the Midwest, right? We're taught to be Midwest nice. So that often means prioritizing being polite over taking care of ourselves. And I encourage you not to do that, right? So if you ever do feel unsafe or uncomfortable, just get up and leave. That is one case where it's okay to ghost, right?
Yes,
That person is abusing you, making you feel unsafe or uncomfortable. Ghost them.
And if you are at a bar and you're having trouble maybe shaking someone, a lot of the time if you approach a staff member and you tell them, hey, I'm on a first date, I'm really unsafe around this person, can I pay now and leave? Can I go? You know what I mean? Like a lot of the time, if there is staff there, even if you don't know them, they would help you. If you are... if you're at dinner and you need to pay for dinner, but you want to leave, and the check hasn't been brought to you yet, you also can just get up and go up to a staff member, be like, hey, can I get the check for this table right now? I'm going to go. Even if you haven't had your food yet, or anything, you know what I mean? Don't worry about practical little things like that when you're in an unsafe situation. Get up, leave. If you feel like someone is going to get angry at you if you try to get up and leave, like if it's unsafe for you to exercise and say no, try saying you're going to the bathroom and then leave, or try saying that you're going to just step outside for a second and you do not want them to come with you, and leave. And if they get angry at that, it's get up and leave. Try your best to get out of the situation. Call someone. A lot of the time, if I am meeting with someone in a situation that maybe I would want to get out of quickly, or if my friends are meeting with someone in a situation they want to get out of quickly, we have a word or something that we would text, and the other person, like I've had my friends text me like, hey, can you call me pretending to have an emergency? I'll call them, be like, hey, you need to get here right now. There's an emergency. I'll make up something. And then you have an excuse to, oh, my friend does this. And if you drove yourself, you can leave. So
yeah, I agree. Those are all really great tips. I don't know anybody personally in the service industry who does not want every single one of their patrons to go home safe. So the vast majority of them are more than willing to do whatever it is that they can to help you, whether that's, like go into the restroom, I'll kind of keep a lookout. Do you want me to call the police? Do you want me to call you an Uber? And they are more than willing to do that to keep you safe.
Absolutely. So all super great things. Dating apps are awesome. They can create meaningful relationships, but it's important to be safe while using them. Situationships can be fun, and they are now a part of the digital age of communication.
Yeah. One thing I did want to add on that situationships point. So again, evoking Taylor Swift, right? So if you listen to All Too Well, right, one of her most famous songs, great lyrics, one of the things that she says is, "You kept me like a secret, but I kept you like an oath." So that really resonated to me when I talked about situationships and really gave it some thought. So not being casual or not exclusive does not mean it has to be secret. And that's something that you should kind of be looking out for in both situationships and in any online dating context. Because scammers will also kind of try to pull that. Like, don't tell anybody about me. Don't tell anybody that we've had this conversation. If they're telling you not to tell anybody or get angry if you do, that's not healthy and that is a red flag. And if you feel like a shameful secret to hide, that doesn't feel good either. So you should want that person, even if it's not exclusive, even if you're not necessarily what we call going public, right? That doesn't mean that they should be telling you, you can't tell this person, you should never say that we were together, or that you only meet in secret. So that's something to keep in mind as well in both of those contexts.
Absolutely, yeah. Not even just in a scamming context, but in a situationship or relationship context. If someone is making you feel like, don't tell anyone, I always keep I have a good relationship with my mom, so I always keep if I can't tell my mom about it, or if I can't tell my best friend about it, probably shouldn't be happening. So if your person that you are talking to or trying to have a romantic relationship with is telling you not to tell someone who is very close to you that you tell everything to, maybe that is a big sign that you should leave, and it's not a good relationship, but it's not a good situationship, that they don't want the best for you.
Yeah, and I always say your gut knows best. Always trust your gut. If the vibe is feeling off, that's saying something. It's not just you being immature. It's not just you being crazy, right? So there is some merit to trusting your gut, especially listening to your friends and those who love you and those who do know you and have your best interests in mind. If those folks are criticizing this person and their behavior towards you, you don't need to keep making excuses for them, right? That's something to look out for. You don't want to feel lonely even though you're with them. That happens a lot, right, in situationships.
Oh my goodness. There was just, shout out if you listen to the Brittany Broski podcast, but she was just talking about on an episode where she was talking about a relationship that wasn't great for her. And she said, I would be laying next to him and he would be sleeping and I would feel completely alone. If you are supposed to be in a relationship where you feel close to someone and you're feeling isolated, left out, alone, like you can't talk to them, like they don't see you, like they don't want to talk to you, that's an awful feeling. And I guarantee that nobody who's making you feel like that is worth staying with. Mm-hmm. And that there are people out there for you who will make you feel seen and loved and understood. I think a lot of the time when situationships happen, there's an idea on the side of the person who maybe wants more and the other person wants less. There's maybe this idea that, I really, really like this person and they're the best that I'm ever going to get. This level of communication is as good as it's going to get. And it's like they held the door for you. And
the bar is on the floor.
The bar is so low. And so I'm not saying don't get to know people who don't, bow at your feet right away. What I am saying though is don't be afraid to have those expectations of how you should be treated in a situationship and in a relationship. You deserve basic respect. You deserve to be treated like a person. You deserve to have someone be interested in getting to know you as a person. And you deserve, especially in a relationship, to have someone who treats you with kindness.
Yeah, because oftentimes the saying is, your standards are too high. I don't know if I think that's possible. They may be different from yours, but I don't think that we should critique people for having too high of standards, even if they're not yours. So that's something to keep in mind when you're talking amongst your friends too, and it seems like, man, they just can't find anybody. They're being so picky. let them be picky.
Yes.
Right? Just because they seem like a good match to you doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to be right for that person. And we should be encouraging and applauding each other for setting those boundaries, having those standards, trying to figure out what we like and what we don't like. In the beginning, I said that relationships change us. That's true. I've been changed by every relationship I had, but it should never change who you are as a person. It shouldn't change those fundamentals. So if you feel yourself changing in a way that you feel is stunting your growth, that you feel not quite like yourself, that's something that you should look out for too. You shouldn't have to change your schedule or your hobbies all around them, especially if it's only one-sided.
And also, relationships, you can be changed by relationships that you have, but fundamentally who you are as a person shouldn't shift that drastically. And it also is, the other person is not going to make that drastic shift for you. I know a lot of people have experienced but he's going to change. He's going to make a big lifestyle change and he's going to become a better person. Relationships can bring out the best in you. And I've seen that happen, and it's wonderful when that happens. That's usually a sign of a healthy relationship. When you start developing healthy habits and feeling good about you as a person and becoming a better version of you, that's awesome that relationship brings that out. However, you cannot force that out of another person. You cannot force another person. If someone is treating you badly and you've communicated to them that you need them to treat you differently and they don't make that change, they're probably not going to. And that's so hard to realize, because sometimes you want them so badly to be Taylor Swift. You want him to be a better man, but maybe it just won't work. And so maybe then after the relationship ends or the situationship ends and the other person goes off and becomes a better version of themselves with another person, that can also make you feel really weird, because you're like, why couldn't you have been that for me? It just wasn't meant to be.
Exactly. Yeah, speaking of Taylor Swift, like in Illicit Affairs, she says, "You know damn well for you I'd ruined myself a million little times." We don't want that, right? That shouldn't be the cost for keeping that relationship. You can't make somebody love you. You can't make somebody change. And I know that can be really difficult to hear, but I do encourage everybody, if you're trying to kind of figure out situationship or a serious relationship, not truly sure where it's going, words without action are pretty meaningless, even if you like the way that they sound. So you need to see what steps they're actually taking to make that change. And if you're noticing that they don't seem bothered or at a form of discomfort by your discomfort, that's a red flag. They're still getting something from you, even if you're not getting what you need from them. So in that case, it might be on you to kind of break that off and move forward.
Absolutely. Bottom line, and what I want the audience to take away from this episode, is that you deserve a relationship that makes you feel good, that makes you a better version of yourself, and is healthy for you. And the digital world and internet culture has kind of convoluted that and made it really hard to navigate. And it's hard to ask for advice, because Gen Z is the first time that dating and the internet have collided.
It's kind of a given for your generation.
Yeah, it's a given, and it's something we've always lived with and that we're now navigating through. But what's important to remember is that boundaries are fine the way that they are. You shouldn't compromise your boundaries for anyone. Communicate your needs and your feelings when you have them, or as soon as possible after you realize that you're having them, whether it is, I want more from this person or I want less from this person. And remember that relationships and dating is supposed to be fun.
Yeah.
If it's stressing you out, that is probably a sign that there is something going on and it's time to communicate about it, or maybe it's time to cut it off. And that relationships shouldn't be stressful.
Yeah. And it's 100% okay for sex and dating and relationships to not be your priority in college. I know there's kind of like a mediated message saying this is what you should focus on. It's what everybody does. This is what college is for. If that's just not your priority or not something that you're interested in, that's okay. Recent studies have actually shown that maybe about 50%, a 50-50 split of college students actually get online and use dating apps. So you could go one way or the other. You're not abnormal if you choose not to.
Absolutely. And yeah, there's nothing wrong with not wanting dating or a relationship, or for dating and relationships maybe to be something that's supplemental to something else that's really important in your life. As long as if you are in a relationship that's supplemental to your life, you and your partner are on the same track about that. But still, you are your own person, and other people don't define who you are, especially not a relationship doesn't define who you are. When you're listing things about yourself, who your partner is maybe shouldn't be in the top 4 or 5 things. Your partner can be really important to you, but you are also a person. So, well, yeah.
One thing I want to say before we end the podcast that's just very important to me is you can do everything right. Every tip that I gave you, you can do. Bad things can still happen. And I just want everybody to know that if those bad things happen, it's not your fault. In no way was it your fault. And that we here at K-State have lots of different resources that we can provide to you in judgment-free zones under any circumstance. And I know that Belle is going to link some of those resources to the podcast page for you.
Absolutely. Everything will be listed in the show notes. You can find resources, and just know that we are always here to help when something bad happens, and to remember that this is still, like, we don't have answers. The situationship phenomenon and dating in the digital age is something that people are still figuring out. So like Trina said, you can do everything right and bad things can still happen. So just know that these are some things that you can do to try and be careful, but relationships and love and, maybe choosing not to pursue a relationship and not being in love and focusing on other things at this moment in your life, that's all normal. Nothing is quote unquote normal, which means everything is also normal. There's nothing that you're supposed to be doing. There's no pressure to be committing to a relationship. There's no pressure to be not committing to a relationship. If you are in a relationship that is healthy and that you feel is worth pursuing long term, do that. You're not wasting your time. But you're also not wasting your time if you're not in a relationship right now and you're figuring out who you are as a person. That's also important. And college is a really great space to go out and make mistakes and talk to people and get to know people and find out what you want and what you don't want. And in the digital age, sometimes it's complicated to do that. But that's why I wanted to bring this conversation to the table and talk about it in this episode. So thank you so much, Trina, for being a guest on this podcast. Do you have anything last minute to add?
I don't think so. Yep. Be yourself. Be safe. Do what you need to do to be healthy. Any choice that you make that's freely given is a good one. Make the choices that are best for you.
Absolutely. So I will see you guys in the next episode of WellCat 101. Thanks for listening.